Thank you for
Well, what a wonderful morning. We got snow in Chicago and in Canada, and we got the heat on here in Cairns, Australia. So
Mm.
say welcome to each one of you here this morning, and what an honor it is to
and this
have,
afternoon.
and this afternoon, what
Mm.
an honor it is to have two wonderful speakers that first time we met just recently in Israel, Jerusalem, and we were there of the Indigenous embassy with the speakers and Dr. Michael uh, Wechsler. Did I get it right, Dr.
Wechsler,
Michael?
Wexler, yeah,
Wechsler.
Wechsler.
yeah.
And to hear a doctor speak in Israel, and so exciting to have you here this morning. I just want to make that introduction, and to those that are already on, I say welcome to you, and those that will be coming on, great to also have you with us. Dr. Michael Wessler
Wechsler.
earned his PhD in Near Eastern and Judaic studies from the University of Chicago. He taught for 28 years at Moody Bible College, Chicago, and is currently a research associate with the Faculty of History at the University of Warsaw. He specializes in biblical languages and the Hebrew scriptures, and his research of publication focus on Judeo-Arabic literature, with particular emphasis on pre-modern exeg- I can't pronounce that name.
Exegetical.
Exegetical and theological literature, as well as the literary and ideological contacts between Jews, Christian, and Muslims. Michael has published 5 books and over 100 scholarly articles. He recently presented an outstanding paper at the Indigenous Embassy in Israel. It was titled The Fabrication of a History, Palestinian Historical
Revisionism.
Revisionism, and the Undermining of the Jewish Connection to the Land of Israel. While his knowledge of Arabic and Jewish literature, he tackles the falsehood that Jews are colonizers in Israel and not indigenous. So, a few tongue twisters in that. But Dr. Michael, I just want to say and honor you here this morning, and we are looking forward to everything that you are sharing with us. So thank you, Dr. Michael.
Oh, thank you so much for that gracious introduction and for the privilege to be a part of this wonderful ministry. In just the brief time I've gotten to know you guys, I mean, meeting you in Jerusalem, your sincerity and heart for Israel and for standing with the truth and your courage in doing so is obvious, and I'm grateful for you guys. Um, Well, thank you for, again, the privilege to present my topic. Can everyone hear, by the way? Am I coming through okay? Is the
Yeah.
sound okay?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. So I'll be presenting a condensed version of the paper that I gave at Jerusalem. It was an academic conference, and the paper I wrote it as an academic paper, so there's quite a bit of information in it. And I won't be giving everything in the 30 minutes that I have now. It'll be a condensed version, but for anyone who's interested in all of the information in the full paper, along with the footnotes and all the sources for the information that I'll be presenting, can access that afterwards. Norman and Barbara said they would put the paper up on the website, so you can access it there. And again, there's many resources, references, links to videos that I include in the paper and the footnotes to back up everything that I'm presenting. So I'll just jump right into it, and I will be very conscious of the time. There's a lot of information, and I'll do my best to get in all the relevant info in the time that I have. So, and forgive me, I'm going to be reading some of this. It's I don't have it all memorized. My memory is it's it's not what it used to be. Well, in any event, let me jump right into it. So, the unprecedented surge in outward expressions of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism since October 7th, 2023, has, as I'm sure you're all aware, seen a corresponding surge in anti-Zionist and anti-Jewish propaganda. And these anti-Zionist and anti-Jewish falsehoods are being broadly disseminated. Again, as I'm sure you're all aware, they're being broadly disseminated not only in the street and in the various organs of popular culture, but also within the halls of academia, where the pursuit of truth is supposed to be paramount. Students are being indoctrinated by professors who, to the approval of an intellectually bankrupt chorus of their peers, are filtering the present existence and existential struggle of the world's only Jewish state, Israel, through a lens of falsehoods based on ignorance, pseudo-scholarship, and commitment to an ideology or a theology, as the case may be, which is anti-Jewish at its core. So, for the remaining time, consistent with my own research proficiency, I'll be going through three main areas in which the anti-Jewish narrative, which is being peddled by Palestinian exponents and their supporters, seeks to undermine and ultimately erase the indigenous Jewish connection to the land of Israel. And as Norman mentioned, I'll be drawing on both medieval Muslim Arabic sources as well as Near Eastern Jewish sources written in Hebrew and in Arabic. I will demonstrate not only the falsity of the Palestinian narrative in the areas that we'll look at, but also uh, how the deployment of the Palestinian narrative in those areas is inconsistent, even with the historical Muslim perspective itself. Okay, so let's jump right into it. And I have a PowerPoint to go along with this, so I think it's best if I do it like this. Let's see. Okay, so it should be showing over my shoulder. Okay, if anyone can't read anything or it's unclear, let me know. Um, so the PowerPoint is to help highlight some of the salient and important uh, data points that I'll be making throughout this brief presentation. So the first area that we'll look at is the uh, how the Palestinian narrative seeks to undermine the Jewish presence in the land of Israel. So, probably the most prevalent of the anti-Jewish falsehoods that I'll be addressing with you guys today, and certainly the one most repeated by the anti-Zionist mobs in the city squares and in the university classrooms, is that the Jewish people in Israel are a colonial entity with no indigenous ties to the Middle East and North Africa, let alone the land of Israel into which they have supposedly intruded. Of course, the presence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, again, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, long predates that of any other existing ethnic group, including Arabs, the significant presence of whom in Israel only began with the Muslim conquest and colonization of the land in the 7th century CE. So, by any reasonable measure of indigeneity, this would confirm, of course, the Jewish people as the preeminent indigenous people of the land. Of course, it's a bit subjective as to where the historical cutoff point would be, but with reference to existing ethnic groups, there is no question the Jewish people are the preeminent indigenous people in terms of having the oldest presence and connection to the land of Israel. And this certainly satisfies the criteria of indigeneity adopted by no other than the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I hesitate to use anything connected with the UN as a measure really of anything, but in this respect, since so many people look to them um, as the hallmark for determining these kinds of issues, I will cite their own standards in this respect and their definitions of indigeneity. One of the key parameters they give is, quote, historical continuity. Hold on, let me get this going here. All right, historical continuity with pre-colonial and or pre-settler societies. whether or not one requires that historical continuity to include residence in the actual land of claimed indigeneity, of course, is debatable, but that makes no difference because the Jewish people have maintained, and this is very important because the popular narrative, even what you hear in the university classrooms, is actually diametrically opposed to what I'm about to say, but the Jewish people have maintained an unbroken presence in the land of Israel from antiquity. And so, according to the same UN forum, another parameter of indigeneity is, quote, self-identification as indigenous peoples at the individual level and accepted by the community as their members. So just consider these two parameters. The first is historical continuity with pre-colonial and or pre-settler societies, so ongoing residence in that land, as far back as the historical records can go. The Jewish people satisfy that. And then for Jewish people who were born outside of the land of Israel but identify as Jews, if they are accepted as Jews by the community of Jews who has maintained that unbroken presence in the land, well, then by the UN's own definitions of indigeneity, the Jewish people, wherever they might be, are the indigenous people of the land of Israel. As to the presence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel in antiquity, this is, of course, as much of a historical truism as anything can be, and it's confirmed by more historical evidence than honestly can be found for most other claims of similar antiquity. Right? Suffice it to say, for our present purposes, that the presence of Jews in the land of Israel long before the military conquest and colonization of that land by Muslim Arabs is in fact broadly recognized in classical Muslim historical tradition. Information about the Jewish people, or as they're called in Arabic, the Banu Israel, children of Israel, in the land of Israel during the period covered by the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament is found in the works of almost every major classical Arab historian. Reference to the Jewish people in the land of Israel during this period is also attested in a loose collection of narratives known in Arabic as Israeliyat. These are found in Muslim folk tales, hadith collections. These are, extra Quranic sayings of Muhammad and traditions about his life. They're also found in classical commentaries on the Quran. In the Quran itself, moreover, the view is even attested that God foreordained or destined the land of Israel for the Jewish people. In Surah Ma'idah, Al-Ma'idah, that's Surah number 5 and verse 21, God addressing the Banu Israel says, quote, O people, enter the holy land that Allah has foreordained for you. And that's in the Quran. So throughout these Muslims, these early Muslim sources, these classical Muslim sources, the land of Israel is typically designated by the terms Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, Balad Bait al-Maqdis, or just Bait al-Maqdis. And all of these terms, which we'll get to in just a little bit, are in fact literal loan translations from Hebrew. We also find the term Asham, S-H-A-M in English, used for the land of Israel, although it's broader than the current state of Israel itself, including Lebanon, Syria, and much of Western Jordan. But far less common in the classical Arab sources is the term Filastin. That's actually far less common than the terms I just mentioned. That term, Filastin, is actually used as a military designation, more properly, Jund Filastin, the military district of Filastin, was applied to the region of Palestina Prima as the current land of Israel, along with part of southern Syria, was termed by the Byzantine Empire. Okay, as to the continuing unbroken presence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel throughout the medieval period of Islamic rule, as well as the subsequent period of Ottoman rule, this is all richly documented in a multitude of carefully researched studies, particularly by scholars such as Moshe Gil. Again, all of this is in the paper. If you want the info, the references, Moshe Gil, Jacob Mann, Eliyahu Ashtor, Yitzchak Ben Tzvi, and many others have produced monographs richly documenting the history, the unbroken presence and history of the Jewish people in the land of Israel before, during, and of course, now after the period of Muslim rule. Right? Interestingly, even in the Second Encyclopedia of Islam, in volume 2, published in 1965, in the article on Philistine, the admission is made in that article that, quote, Palestine had some Jewish inhabitants throughout the period of Islamic rule, unquote. Now, notwithstanding the notion of maybe hundreds of people that term some might give rise to in your mind, the Jewish population of the land of Israel during the period of Islamic rule, during the medieval period, even though it rose and fell according to the ill or goodwill of the Muslim rulers at the time, it was in fact quite significant. Even though precise population figures are generally difficult to come by, it can be conservatively estimated that the Jewish population in the land of Israel throughout the Muslim period numbered at least in the tens of thousands, and in some places the Jewish population even outnumbered that of Muslims. For example, at the end of the 10th century, the Muslim geographer Shams ad-Din al-Muqaddasi, a resident of Jerusalem, wrote in his famous book Ahsan at-Taqasim that the majority of the city's inhabitants, this is Jerusalem now, that the majority of the city's inhabitants were in fact Christians and Jews. Whereas he writes, quote, the mosque is devoid of congregants and learned scholars, unquote. Another example on Purim, the holiday of Purim in 1039 in Ramla, we have a Judeo-Arabic letter written in that year by the Jewish communal leader Nathan ben Abraham, who describes how 400 Jewish men gathered in the main hall of one of that city's synagogues to engage in a collective reading of the Scroll of Esther. From this, as reasonably observed by scholar Moshe Gil, we can infer that there were approximately 1,000 Jewish families residing in that city, which would equate to more or less 5,000 souls. We also have documents from the famous Cairo Geniza in Egypt, which reveal that in the early 9th century, Gaza actually had a very important Jewish community, and including, in fact, a center of study. For instance, we find reference to the prominent Masoret, that was the name for scholars who worked on transmitting the Hebrew Bible, a famous Masoret by the name of Moses the Gazan. This is around 800 CE. And we also have Tiberias in Galilee, of course, which, as I'm sure many of you know, was one of the centers of worldwide Jewish scholarship throughout the medieval period, being the city to which the Sanhedrin had relocated after the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 136 AD. And it was also the location where one of the first yeshivas, or main centers of Jewish learning, was established, a direct outgrowth of the Sanhedrin, and one of the three main yeshivas in the Jewish world throughout the medieval period. It was in Tiberias. I have more to say on this topic in the paper, but I'll move on to the next area that I'd like to address. The next focal point of attack in the Palestinian narrative is not just the unbroken Jewish presence in the land, but the second area that we'll address now. Let me skip over to that. Okay. I need to be using this a little more here. Okay. All right. The second area has to do with the undermining of Jewish identity. So the primary claim in this connection deployed by Palestinian exponents to undermine Jewish identity is referred to as the Khazar theory. And this is, as I'll talk about in just a second, this has been thoroughly debunked. But this Khazar theory essentially goes like this: a nomadic Turkic group, ethnic group related to the Turks, so it's a Turkish or Turkic people group situated between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So we have the Black Sea here, Caspian Sea, this area right here, the highlighted area is the area of the Turkic Khazars, the Khazar people. They don't exist anymore, but the theory goes like this. This people, the Khazars, converted to Judaism in the late 8th or 9th century CE, and following the fall of the Khazar kingdom at the end of the 10th century, they then emigrated to Europe, where they established themselves as the ancestors of Ashkenazi Jewry. So Ashkenazi Jewry being essentially European Jewry. So, as noted by Yehoshaphat Harkabi, a Jewish scholar from the previous century, in his excellent book, I highly recommend it, Arab Attitudes to Israel. It was his PhD dissertation at Hebrew University and then translated into English. It's still available. You can find it used online. Highly recommend it. Again, Arab Attitudes to Israel, published in 1972. He pointed out that even then, this Khazar theory was being broadly peddled in the Arab world as an ideological weapon targeting the legitimacy of the state of Israel. And this is especially true among the Palestinians, where this claim has been given very strong, vociferous traction by the political leadership as well as religious leaders and the popular media. In other words, the claim that the Jewish people today and those who live in Israel, the Israeli Jewish Israelis, are not actually true Jews. That is, the Jews of the Bible. They're converted Khazars. They're descendants of this Turkic group that converted in the 8th or 9th century and then emigrated to Europe, where they became Ashkenazi Jews. Broadly peddled in the Arab world and among the Palestinians in particular. So, right out of the gate, I would point out, despite its very sloppy application by Palestinian exponents to all Israeli Jews, to all Jews basically, this claim has no bearing on the majority of Israeli Jews because the majority of Israeli Jews are not, in fact, descendants of Ashkenazi Jewry, but descendants of Mizrahi and Sephardi Jewry. That is to say, descendants of Jewish people who never left the Near East and North Africa, right? And Sephardi Jewry, that term Sephardi or Sephardi refers to Jews from traditionally the Iberian Peninsula, Spain. So Mizrahi and Sephardi Jewry, the majority of Jewish people in Israel descend from ancestors who have an established and well-documented history, unbroken, in the Middle East and the Mediterranean basin, including the land of Israel, as I just mentioned earlier, right? As for its application to Ashkenazi Jewry, the Khazar theory, as I just said a second ago, has been soundly debunked and disproven by the meticulous work of many scholars and scientists. So there's a lot of info here. I'll just run through the reasons, the main reasons that this theory has been rejected, right? Number one, the unreliability of the few sources that mention the Khazars' Jewishness. The primary sources that are relied upon that mention the Jewishness or the conversion of the Khazars to Judaism are two Hebrew documents and a handful of references in classical Muslim Arabic works that were contemporary with the Khazars or written just after the Khazar kingdom was conquered and fell around 970 CE. So the two Hebrew documents, one is a letter by the supposed king of the Khazars to Chasdai ben Shaprut, a prominent Spanish Jew, and the other is an anonymous historical account of the Khazar supposed conversion, actually contradict each other and have been judged by scholars to be pseudepigraphal, that is, fabrications, fanciful fabrications. The handful of Muslim Arabic works, contemporary Muslim Arabic works that mention the supposed conversion of the Khazars actually have all been shown to be their information about the Khazars based on rumor and hearsay, not firsthand accounts. So that's the first reason. The second reason for its rejection is the silence of the vast majority of other sources, historical and literary sources, regarding the Khazars' supposed conversion. Now, this silence is of several types. Number one, the majority of classical Muslim historians and geographers, including some of the most highly respected among them, such as At-Tabari, Ibn Qutayba, etc., they say nothing about the Khazars' supposed conversion to Judaism. We only have one first-hand account of a Muslim visitor to the Khazar kingdom. And in that account, it's the account of a man named Salam the interpreter, who was sent by the Abbasid Caliph al-Wathiq in the year 842 to search for the mythical wall of Alexander that he built to keep out the hordes of Gog and Magog. So there's a whole mythology around that. But this caliph sent this man, Salam, to search for the wall. And he visited the Khazars and left behind memoirs describing his time with the Khazars. And again, this is at the end of the 9th century, precisely at the time when the Khazars are supposedly converted to Judaism. And he says nothing, not a word about their Jewishness, right? In fact, just after the conquest and fall of the Khazar kingdom, the Muslim scholar I mentioned earlier, Al-Muqaddasi, a resident of Jerusalem, a geographer who lived in Jerusalem, actually visited the capital of the former Khazar Empire, Itil, and during his visit, as he records, he found no Jewish Khazars there, but in fact many Muslims. The majority of Khazars he found were in fact Muslims, right? Another type of silence is that of the Jewish scholars heading the academies of the two yeshivot in Iraq. So, as I mentioned earlier, there were three main centers of Jewish learning in the medieval period. One was in Tiberias. It was a direct outgrowth of the Sanhedrin, and two others were founded in Iraq, in cities named Sura and Pumbedita. And so other than Tiberias, these two in Iraq were main centers of Jewish learning. That's where the biggest, most erudite and learned scholars within the Jewish world went and taught, and it was the center of Jewish life, essentially, religious life, etc. And the heads of those two academies for 200 years, from 750 to 950 CE, in their vast writings and letters pertaining to all areas of Jewish life and law and theology and history and culture and custom, say not a word, not a peep, not the slightest mention or reference to a kingdom of supposed converted Khazars. Uh, just a little bit to the east and north of them, by the way, right between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Remember, these two academies are in Iraq. So for 200 years, the heads of the two academies, of the two Jewish communities closest to the Khazar kingdom, say nothing about any supposedly converted Khazars, right? Nor do we have any archaeological information that would point to any kind of Jewish culture among the Khazars. Nor, by the way, do we have reference to any Jewish Khazars in the historical records of other surrounding peoples, such as in early Russian works, Georgian works, Armenian works, Bulgarian works, or Syriac works. Do we have any reference to Jewish Khazars? Okay, the next reason, the absence of any linguistic elements that would link Ashkenazi Jewry to the Khazars. In other words, neither the names in Yiddish nor the Yiddish language itself, which is common to Ashkenazi Jewry, exhibit any influence of Central Asian languages. And of course, the Khazars, being in Central Asia, would have spoken a Central Asian language. Yet Yiddish, as you might be aware, is essentially based on German. It's the stock of Yiddish is German, and the Germanic stock of Yiddish accords perfectly with the long accepted scholarly view that Ashkenazi Jewry arose through migration of the Jewish people from the Middle East and North Africa up the Italian peninsula into the trading cities of the Rhine Valley, where they eventually adopted the German stock of Yiddish and then branched out throughout the rest of Europe and then east into Asia. Okay, another reason it was rejected is that we have actually references, hold on, to very un-Jewish practices among the supposedly Jewish Khazars. All right, I need to speed it up here. I see my time is ticking away. I'm going to run through this a little more quickly. Suffice it to say, we do have mention of the Khazars among medieval Jewish writers, not to their Jewishness, but to their practice of customs which are fundamentally non-Jewish. For example, in the first commentary on the Book of Esther ever written by a Jew, around 935 CE, one of the heads of the academies in Iraq that I just mentioned, a man by the name of Saadia Gaon. He was the head or the Gaon of the yeshiva in Sura in Iraq. He wrote the first Jewish commentary on the Book of Esther. And in order to drive home the actual reality of a man like Haman being worshipped as a god, because in the Book of Esther, the king passes a law that everyone in his gate in the court is to bow down and worship Haman. And many scholars have puzzled over that. Why would they worship a man as God, right? Well, you might be looking at it from a Judeo-Christian perspective, which does make it a head scratcher. But as Saadia Gaon points out in his commentary, this is actually a common practice in that part of the world. And as an example, he points to the Khazars of his day. And he says this, quote, before the man of the best qualities, they do indeed prostrate themselves and worship him. And they call him by the name Chakan, notwithstanding that he dies, and they set up another one in his place as time goes on. So Chakan is the Khazar throne name for the Khazar king. This Jewish scholar is telling us that the Khazars practice idolatry, that they worship their king at a time when they are supposedly converted to Judaism. And I should point out, of course, that again, as I'm sure you all are aware, idolatry it's not just a sin, but in Judaism, it's considered one of the three gravest sins of all, on a par with sexual immorality and murder, right? Idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder are the three gravest sins of all, for which there is no excuse under any circumstance in Judaism. Okay, I'll lay out the remaining reasons and we'll move on to the last area since time is ticking. The genetic evidence, there's no genetic evidence linking Ashkenazi Jewry to the Khazars, but in fact, good genetic evidence linking Ashkenazi Jewry to Mizrahi and Sephardi Jewry, that is to Middle Eastern Jewry. Another reason that this theory has been rejected, Jewish communities already existed in Europe long before the fall and dispersal of the Khazars. So again, the Khazar theory maintains that Ashkenazi Jewry arose from the Khazars after their kingdom fell and they emigrated to Europe. But we already have well-established Jewish communities in Europe before the Khazar kingdom was conquered and before they supposedly emigrated. Okay, let me move on to the last area, my friends. One last thing I'll point out, though. There are Palestinians who do realize the weakness of the Khazar theory, and so they do from time to time. And I'm not just talking about, people in their living rooms for conversation or, among themselves, but political leaders like Mahmoud Abbas, religious leaders, literary figures, scholars, mullahs, prominent figures do actually from time to time among the Palestinians claim that they are the descendants of the ancient Philistines or the Canaanites. And you see why they're doing this. This gives them competing indigeneity that would be in terms of its antiquity as old as that of the Jewish people. That's why they claim it. But of course, this is pure nonsense. The Palestinians identify as Arabs and an Arab Muslim tradition, and I think there's no reason to dispute it. The Arab people are in fact the descendants of Ishmael, who is neither a Canaanite nor a Philistine, but of course a son of Abraham. In fact, the contemporary surnames of many, many, many Palestinians itself shows you very clearly in and of itself that they are not native to the land of Israel. For example, among the Palestinians, you find names like this, Al-Masri, which means from Egypt, a very, very popular surname among Gazan Palestinians. You find Al-Khawrani, which means from Khawran in Syria, Al-Khalabi, which means from Aleppo, Al-Surani from Tyre in Lebanon, Saidawi from Sidon in Lebanon, Trablusi, You see where this is going. Al-Hijazi, these are Palestinian surnames. Al-Hijazi from the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Karaki, Al-Zarqawi, Al-Iraqi, Al-Fayoumi. All of these surnames indicate their family's geographical descent, right? This clearly demonstrates that they are not native to the land of Israel, but emigrated there over the last several hundred years. We'll get back to that point. The last area that I'd like to address, bear with me here. I don't have a lot of time left. Oi, I think I'm pretty much out of it. I'm going to eat into my question time. Just give me 5 minutes, if that's okay. Um, the last area that the Palestinian narrative seeks to attack, to undermine and attack, is that of Jewish toponymy, which is to say, the established ancient Jewish names, place names of various locations within the land of Israel. So this has to do with the claim by Palestinian exponents that most of the Hebrew place names used by Israelis are applied to places with pre-existing Arabic names, and that the Israelis are now renaming them with Jewish names, Hebrew names, to enforce their colonialist claims, right? Now, it is true that there are some genuine Arabic names for places in the land of Israel, right? For instance, there are some places that were founded during the period of Islamic rule, like Ramla, the city of Ramla, which, by the way, the Israelis retain in Hebrew. They call it Ramla as well. They don't have another name for it, right? You also have genuine Arabic names for ancient Hebrew place names, for places that are well established in Jewish antiquity, like Hebron or Chevron in Hebrew, which Arabs refer to as Al-Khalil, right? So it is true there are some genuine Arabic names, but the vast majority of Arabic names for various places within the land of Israel are simply Arabic pronunciations of much older Hebrew and Aramaic place names. For example, and I'm just going to run through this quickly, you have Beit Lachem in Arabic, which is actually, you can hear it. Beit Lechem, it's Hebrew Beit Lechem. Beit Lachem is nonsense in Arabic. It actually means house of flesh, house of meat in Arabic, which is a ridiculous name. But Beit Lechem makes perfect sense in Hebrew, house of bread, place of bread. It's an agricultural place name. Batir in Arabic is Beitar in Hebrew. I mean, you can see this list. Aricha, Oricha is Yericho. Yibna is Yavne, right? You have Beit Jibrin is Beit Guvrin. Jinin is Ein Ganim, mentioned in Joshua. Tuqua is Tekoa. Safuria, that's Sephoris, is Tzipori in Hebrew. The list goes on and on. As we wind it up here, we'll focus in on Jerusalem, which is an especially interesting case study. In Arabic, there are many names for Jerusalem. In fact, in very early Arabic literature, they use the name Iliyah, which is just an Arabic pronunciation of the Latin name Aelia, given to Jerusalem by the Emperor Hadrian after the Bar Kokhba revolt was put down. And he renamed Jerusalem to Aelia. That's Hadrian's family name, in fact, for the same reason he renamed the province of Judea to Palestina, right? After using the Latin form of Philistia, the Jewish people's ancient enemy, to stick it to the Jews basically, and remove the fervor and spirit associated with those place names. So that's what the Arabs called it, Ilia. We also find in early Arabic writings the name Sichyon or Tzion which is from the Hebrew Tzion. We find Shalom, Shalim, or Salim, which is just the Arabic pronunciation of Hebrew Shalem. And then interestingly, we find in Arabic various pronunciations of the Hebrew or Aramaic name of Jerusalem, right? So in Hebrew, again, as I know most of you know, Jerusalem is called Yerushalayim, or in Aramaic, Yerushalem. And so the Arabs pronounced it that way too. Early on in Islam, they called it Urshalim or Rishalim, Urshalam. These are all Arabic pronunciations of the Hebrew and Aramaic name for Jerusalem, right? Now, eventually, the Arabs also came to refer to Jerusalem as Beit al-Maqdis and al-Quds, which is the main name used today. Now, Beit al-Maqdis is actually an abbreviation of Madinat Bait al-Maqdis, and that term is a direct loan translation of the Hebrew Ir Beit HaMikdash or Aramaic Karta de Beit Makdisha, both of which mean the city of the house of the sanctuary, where the sanctuary refers to the temple. So Beit al-Maqdis in Arabic, in other words, is just an abbreviation of the literal translation of the Hebrew name for Jerusalem. And that's also the case with Al-Quds, which is the Arabic term for Jerusalem today, the main name that they use. And this only really came into usage as the main name starting in the 11th century AD. That's an abbreviation of Madinat al-Quds, literally the city of holiness, which is a direct literal translation, loan translation from the Hebrew name Ir HaKodesh or Karta de Kudsha in Aramaic, both meaning the city of holiness. Now this is interesting. Al-Quds, the common Arabic name for Jerusalem, in addition to everything I've just said, another reason confirming that that is actually literally taken from the Hebrew name for Jerusalem is that in Muslim Arabic, that root from which you get the name Quds, the root Qadasa, is not the normal root used in Muslim Arabic to denote holiness or sanctity. That root in Arabic is actually Harama, right? As they refer today to that site, what we call the Temple Mount, they call um, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa or Al-Haram Al-Sharif. Okay, let me move on here. Where are we? All right, I'm almost out of time. Let me wrap up with this final point here. Just picking up on that last thing I said, the current Arabic designation of the Temple Mount, Al-Haram Al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, as they call it. This notion, which you hear so much these days in the popular media, and of course from Palestinian political leaders, religious leaders, wherever, that the Temple Mount is the third holiest site in Islam, that actually is not an early Islamic dogma. That view is not established in early Islam, right? It's found nowhere in the Quran. Nowhere in the Quran, in fact, is the Temple Mount anywhere referred to as a holy site, right? Um, in fact, in fact, even in the 14th century AD now, 600 years ago, in the 14th century AD, one of the most respected Islamic theologians of all time, Ibn Taymiyyah, known as Shaykh al-Islam, the elder of Islam, in one of his writings, firmly rejected any notion that there is any holy site in the land of Israel, let alone the Temple Mount. And let me just read this quote to you. This is what he wrote. I'll put it up there. There is no place in Jerusalem designated by Allah as a holy site. In Arabic, that would be Haram. Neither the burial site of Abraham in Hebron or any other site except for 3 places total. In other words, in all of Islam, there's only 3 places that can justly be referred to as a holy site, a haram. And he goes through them, of course. There's Mecca, the second is Medina, and the third, which is debated, is Waj. It's a valley in the Hijaz in Saudi, in the Arabian Peninsula. And so let me wrap up with this point. It was only after the view of the Temple Mount being an Islamic holy site after that view started becoming entrenched following the conquest of Jerusalem by Saladin and in the centuries thereafter, in the popular Muslim mind, the view that Jerusalem was a holy site, which in fact was largely fueled by Jewish and Christian views of that site, it eventually began to take hold of the popular religious Muslim consciousness and became entrenched by popular force as a dogma of Islam, right? But even the Encyclopedia of Islam admits, and I'm reading right from the Encyclopedia of Islam in their entry on Al-Quds, or actually this is from their entry on Al-Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount, quote, that expression, Al-Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, would only seem to have become imposed by popular usage rather than full agreement on the unified holiness of the site. The view that that site is holy to Islam, let alone the third holiest, only became established on a popular level as a dogma of Islam from the 16th century. That is the beginning of the Ottoman period. And since then, it has been repeated ad nauseum so that now everyone accepts it as fact, right? It was pushed in particular by the former Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and Nazi ally, by the way, Muhammad Amin al-Husseini, who pushed it strongly to promote his propaganda war against the Jews. And the Mufti al-Husseini actually commissioned the renovation of the Dome of the Rock and the mosque at the southern end of the mount, which were quite dilapidated in his day, hardly speaking of treatment as the third holiest site in Islam, to again compete with the Jewish and Christian, but mainly Jewish view of that site as a holy site. So since then, this view that the site is Islam's third holiest has been regularly deployed by Palestinians and others ignorant of the view's history to present a supposedly inherently equal or even superior counterpoint to the Jewish view of that site as Judaism's holiest. And with that, I'll end. Forgive me for going over. But I guess we don't even have time for questions. I don't know what you guys want to do. Again, forgive me for going over. I tried to squeeze it all in as best I could. I am done.
Okay, that was awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. That was just incredibly informative and something that we never get to hear normally. So we will have a very brief time of questions to Dr. Michael, and then we're really looking forward to hearing from Melodie. Also have a time of questions with Melodie as well. So we'll go to Denise first.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much. My question is, with all our brilliant scholars, Jewish scholars, and the Arab, scholars who support the idea that Jewish people are indigenous, how come it's taken so long for scholars to begin to refute? Why didn't they start refuting this when it was first talked about?
That's a great question. So, in my concluding paragraph, I didn't read it, but I do briefly address that. They've sold their souls to the anti-Zionist agenda. That's all I can say. I mean, there are scholars that nothing I shared with you was discovered by me or is new information. I'm just collating information that's been out there and is available to everybody, and that scholars in these fields should and probably are well aware of. But they've sold their souls. The anti-Zionist agenda and defeating Israel, as an outpost of capitalism in the Arab world, of Western hegemony and capitalism, whatever you want to call it, imperialism, for them fighting that agenda and Zionism and all that Israel represents is more important than historical truth. And, for the other scholars who aren't committed to that agenda, they've been cowed. They've just been cowed by the mob, by the academic mob. To a degree, I can understand for younger scholars not wanting to speak up, to a degree, right? But there's no question, if you do speak up on these issues and simply present the facts of history as I briefly presented them, you will be ostracized.
I understand
I've
that.
experienced it personally.
I'm talking about 20, 30 years ago when all of this, all the rubbish was starting to come through, and we have all this research. What has, stopped scholars then saying, right at the start of all of this, no, this isn't the fact. Anyway,
Yeah, I
know. It's not.
Sometimes scholars keep things a little too intellectual and don't translate that into more popular presentations of their work. They stay in their ivory towers.
So thank you so much for that. So we've now got Kathy and then Amanda, and we'll have to leave the questions at that for now. There will be more time at the end. So over to Amanda, if you can unmute. Kathy, if you could unmute, and then Amanda.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was an excellent presentation for a non-scholar. It was really grabbable. I have a question just on a big picture thing. Was when the time of the when the second temple was destroyed, was that the peak of the Jewish population in the world at the time? And did after that, I heard in something I've written that about 650,000 were taken captives off to Rome. That's over 500,000, and a whole lot were killed. And then they ran up to Tiberias, and most of them the remaining ones hid in the North Galilee area. Is that kind of a rough overview?
Have the answer. That's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. Josephus talks about that period quite a bit, and hundreds of thousands of Jewish people were killed, according to Josephus, if I recall my numbers correctly. But whether the Jewish population at that time was at the peak, of what it's ever been, I do not know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
No, okay.
I tend not to think so. I mean, even though, as I said, hundreds of thousands perhaps of Jews were killed. And yes, they were forbidden for many centuries by Hadrian and ensuing Roman law from entering Jerusalem. The bulk just settled elsewhere. Many did go further east, giving rise to those important communities out in Iraq, and Persia, even in other areas in the Near East. And then, of course, many migrated to Europe. But the Jewish community still flourished after that in the various places that they did live into which they migrated. So I don't have the numbers. I don't know the answer, but I tend to think, my impression is that the population of the Jews did continue to grow, and that whatever the number was that were killed then, it didn't curb the continuing growth of the Jewish people. But whether it's, pre-World War II, whether that was the peak, whether it was during the period you mentioned or at some period in between those, I don't know. I mean, local population figures are hard enough to come by. As far as worldwide collective figures, it's a good question.
And already there were so many in Babylon and that area. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. On to Amanda.
Thank you for that. It was very interesting. I just, as you said, none of that information isn't available to people if they want to find it. And it's a bit on the back of the other question, but why do you think so many current day academics, not Jewish, non-Jewish, are so quick and willing to, just preach the lies or spout the lies, support the lies? I mean, you said about being ostracized, losing their jobs, but is that just it, or?
It is. The pressure it's strong. They honestly, because they're cowards. I don't know what else to say. It's a combination of ignorance and cowardice. It's just the lack of
excuse, because all of that information is readily available and it's not that hard to find.
Yeah, but then you're going to be fighting against a mob. I mean, even in your own classroom, potentially. So, I mean,
when Qatar funds the university that employs you.
Yeah. It takes a lot of moral backbone to stand up and proclaim what's basic truth, at least in this area. And sad to say, most academics are just not willing to, at least those who know better, are not willing to do that. And those who don't know better, they're just going with the flow, unfortunately. It is a bit of a head scratcher to a degree, but I mean, you could ask the same thing about German academics, in the 1930s, right? Yeah. And the academics in all the countries that the Nazis occupied. It's human nature. You have to have strong convictions to stand up, even for things that aren't religious belief, but basic truth and empirical fact, that run contrary to popular political and cultural views. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of moral fiber and conviction. And I think consistent with where the West is at generally and intellectually today, that kind of absolutism when it comes to moral conviction, and moral fiber is it's becoming increasingly rare. People just don't have it. Everything is relative. And, that we're seeing the results of it now.
All right. Well, look, thank you very much. Dr. Michael, that was just amazing. We thank you for your moral fiber and courage and to go against the flow. And your knowledge of Arabic also would have been a tremendous advantage in the amazing research that you've done. So we thank you for that. And obviously your knowledge of Hebrew as well. So we thank you for that. And we can, there will maybe be some time later to engage again, but we really need to bring Melodie on now. And we are also looking forward to hearing from her. So over to Norman to introduce her.
What an honor. Thank you, Dr. Michael.
Yeah.
Our next wonderful speaker we will have there this morning, this afternoon in their time. Melodie Greyeyes is a member of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. She is the daughter of residential school survivors, Marcel and Doris Greyeyes. Great to have your mum on with us also. Melodie has a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Saskatchewan, has been married to her husband, Gavin Howell, for 28 years, and they have 4 beautiful adult children. They have operated an arborist business for 25 years and live in Alberta. She says that while on tour in Israel in 2014, God revealed the prophetic scriptures regarding his plan for the Jewish people and world redemption. Since then, the Lord has revealed a significant connection between the Indigenous peoples of the world and his firstborn Israel. She is passionate to encourage the body of Messiah in Canada to be a blessing to Israel by praying for the peace of Jerusalem, combating anti-Semitism, and honoring them as God's chosen people. Melodie was appointed National Director of CMJ Canada in 2021 and relates to CMJ Israel. Melodie, just want to honor you there this morning, and it's great to have you with us on Zoom. So thank you, Melodie.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to share. Basically, the presentation that I'm going to be sharing is about recognizing the Jews as being indigenous to the land from our perspective as being indigenous people of Turtle Island. Turtle Island is what we call North America because we do not recognize the borders that have become Canada and the United States. So I'll just be sharing some of a few scriptures and a few photos, actually, because we actually went to Israel where we met up with our brother and sister here, Barb and Norman, just in the fall time here. And so I'll just share just a few photos, and it was a great honor to be in Israel to really recognize and affirm the indigeneity of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. Recognizing how we as Indigenous people recognize being Indigenous. So this is what I'm going to bring before you, what we think of being Indigenous to the land. So I just wanted to go a few small scriptures. Oh, just a second here. I don't think I'm sharing it. There we go. I think I lost you. Just a minute. Okay, here we go. I got to share it. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me just, I'll go. Okay, there we are. Okay, so as Indigenous people, I thought it was just important to say that in general, the Indigenous peoples, I would say mostly, well, of Turtle Island anyways, we believe in one creator, generally speaking, through whom we've received all life. And that's so evident here in Psalm 148, 1 to 14, where it talks about praising the Lord. Praise the Lord from the heavens. Praise him in the heights. Praise him, all his angels. Praise him, all his hosts. Praise him, sun and moon. Praise him, all you shining stars. Praise him, you highest heavens and you waters above the heavens. Let them praise the name of the Lord, for he commanded and they were created. So we do in our culture, we speak about the sun and the moon and the animals, but of course they are the created things. The creator is who we are praising. That's who we are worshiping. And so that's just important. Important to understand that, because some people think that we sometimes worship the sun and we worship the moon, but no, we worship the creator, you know. And I thought it was just also very interesting, because what we do is we thank the creator for life and for all the universe, because everything is connected. And when we say, you know, we hear the Jewish blessings where it says, creator of the universe. And that's so similar to what we believe. He's the creator of the universe, and so do the Jewish people. So there's all these similarities that we have as Indigenous people here, and the Indigenous people that we believe are the Indigenous people to Israel, and what they actually say and speak that are so similar. You know, just again, affirming the Jewish people's indigeneity to the land and the way that we think, this big picture thinking. So we also only believe that we are one part of the Creator's plan, that God has a big picture and we are just one small part of it. We recognize, like I said, that we're his creation, but there's a much bigger picture. Indeed, we actually call the Creator the Great Mystery. That's one of his names for us, a great mystery. Because we can't understand all of who he is. And again, similarly with the Jewish people, there's this mystery of the creator of the universe, the God of Israel. We relate to the creator, and we also call him the Great Spirit through ceremony and prayer. And indeed, we are a spiritual people, recognizing also that God is spirit, and this is how we connect to him, is by the Spirit. So these things, like I'm a believer, and so all of this really being a believer in Yeshua is really a fulfillment of what our people spoke about long ago. You know, our grandfather teachings, which is what we call it, they call us to live in a good way with all of creation, meaning the land, the plants, the animals, the people, because we are all connected. So our sacred principles that are, again, very similar to the principles of the Jewish people that are outlined in the Tanakh is honor, love, humility, honesty, obedience, relationship, and hope, because this keeps us connected as all of creation together, as people and the land. Is the one big picture. God's creation, meaning people and the land. So I wanted to break it down for Indigenous people, for us as Indigenous people. What does it mean to be Indigenous? And that word Indigenous means, we think of that as of the land. We're people of the land. So it's all very much tied to the land when you are Indigenous. So number one, like I said, we're connected to the land. We are from the land. We're part of the land. And of course, we will return to the land. We have a relationship to the land, and as Indigenous people, we call it Mother Earth, because through her, we have life, and she nurtures us. We receive all we need from the earth and what comes from the earth, you know, the plants and the animals. We get all our essential needs, our shelter, our food, everything comes from the earth. And so just as we as individuals are nurtured by our mother, in that way we say Mother Earth. And another very big point is that the people and the land cannot be separated. This is what, as the Indigenous people, we are connected to the land. We cannot be separated. And, it's very, like, Israel is the only people that God made a covenant with. And with the land of Israel, the people and the land, there's that covenant. So the idea of covenant, we also just wanted to, as people of Turtle Island, we have made what we think of as covenants over the years since the newcomers came to the land. So we understand this idea of covenant that God made with the Jewish people. We understand that from our viewpoint as well. We believe that the Creator witnessed the agreements between our ancestors and the newcomers when they came in about the 16 to 1800s. We called these, what we think of them as covenants, but they're called treaties, legally speaking. The treaty, though, held a much greater significance as our people regarded it as a Creator-sanctioned covenant that would guarantee the continuation of our people's livelihood. But unfortunately, unlike the government, the First Nations saw the agreement as the beginning of a continuing relationship with the government in which both groups would provide benefits and maintain coexistence with each other. So the first covenants were sealed as friends by, various means. The first ones were sealed with the wampum belt and the silver covenant chain, and the picture of it is that we were nations, like nation to nation agreements, that we were not coming under anybody, but we were coexisting together and partnering together on the land, So, and then following that, all the other treaties in Canada anyways, 1 to 11, those ones were imposed by the Crown for land settlement, and these were sealed with the peace pipe on our behalf, and then by the newcomers with the Holy Bible. However, like I said, our ancestors believed that the spirit and intent of treaty created an everlasting commitment to live in partnership with the newcomers on this land. And these are the words that our elders, our ancestors who signed these treaties, this is actually what they said. As long that these agreements would last, as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows. And I thought that is just, the wording of it is so similar to what's written in the Tanakh in Jeremiah 31, 35 to 36. Just a minute, both parties to the covenant are treaty people. Okay, so that's one thing that we always say, because we both sign these agreements. Our people, our ancestors, but also the newcomers, the ones who came since then, they are also treaties because it was their ancestors who signed those as well. So we understand this idea of everlasting. It hasn't gone away. God also made a covenant that the land of Israel belongs perpetually to the people of Israel as the indigenous people of that land. And we know that in the Bible, it speaks about Genesis 15:18, and God says, to your offspring, I give this land. So we recognize that not only, it's actually written in ancient documents that this land was given to Israel. But within that, the same covenant, of course, God made an everlasting covenant with the people of Israel, the only nation he made a covenant with. And this was the same wording that I was speaking about earlier was made with the people from Jeremiah 31, 35 to 36, where we talked about in our covenant that our agreement would last as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. So did the Lord say this about his people, that they would forever be a people before him, and indeed with very similar wording. And I just thought, that's just very interesting that the Jewish people would use very similar, like God would use that same wording with the indigenous people of Israel as we saw it when we wrote those treaties. So in Jeremiah 31, it says, thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for light by day, and the fixed order of the moon and the stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares the Lord, then shall the offspring of Israel cease from being a nation before me forever. So as Indigenous believers here in Turtle Island, because of this, we recognize that out of all the first peoples of the earth, Israel is the first of all the first peoples. This is what we say. Because you are the only nation that God made a covenant with, a written covenant. And so in this way, we actually, oopsie. So I just wanted to share here. So like I mentioned, we went to Israel. We had a group of us, of Indigenous believers, and we did the Solidarity March, which was at the end of, no, it was beginning of November when we were there, to stand with the people of Israel, declaring that they are the indigenous people to the land of Israel. So you can see there's a number of us here that walked from the Jaffa Gate to the Kotel, declaring, yes, the indigenous people are the first peoples of this land. So that was indeed an honor to do that. And I also wanted to share, so while we were in Israel, our group, recognizing, I just wanted to share. So when we went around, we just wanted to come alongside, declaring that the indigenous people of Israel the Jewish people are indigenous to the land. And so we came through our cultural expression. And one of the ways that we worship Creator is through the drum. Because the drum, as we play it, we believe this is the heartbeat of the land. Again, just this connection to the land, that when we hear the drum being played, it connects us to the land. And so as we went around to different communities in Israel, just coming alongside, declaring this, it really was something to see them respond to the drum as being indigenous people. We were on an army base here. We were actually with Brenda and Norman there, playing, the drum and using our cultural expression to worship God and just to honor the people of the land. And it was on the same day on the left here, you can see we were at an army base and just affirming the young people, declaring, yes, they are indigenous to the land, and they are fighting on behalf of their people, standing with them, keeping the borders that God had entrusted to them. And then to the right here, you can see we actually had the privilege of just meeting and loving the Holocaust survivors. And we were playing the drum and they just loved it, because I think, it's that primal instinct, where the drum, it just pulls that heart. It's the heartbeat of the land. And they so connected to the drum, so much so that he wanted to play. He was just dancing away, and then they gave him the drum, the stick, and he was playing with them. And I just thought, that's just it's a spiritual almost kind of that connection, because this is the heartbeat of the land. So that's number one, that we are connected to the land, right? Okay, so I'll just take it off with this. So secondly, as Indigenous people, we are called to be stewards of the land. So what does that mean? Stewardship. That we have a responsibility to care for the land and to manage resources on behalf of God. We are called to respect it and all that lives on it, the animals, the plants, the resources, etc. So the earth, and what's interesting is, as the indigenous people, the earth responds to the people. Like I said, you cannot separate the land from the people. So, but when the people are separated from the land, the earth doesn't produce life. Very indicative here. Through our history here in Turtle Island, the Creator provided all of what we needed, like we said, to live, which included the bison. We're from central Canada. I'm from the Cree tribe. So the way we survived was with the buffalo. And the buffalo provided everything we needed: shelter, food, everything, and of course, all the medicines of the land and everything. There used to be between 30 to 60 million buffalo that roamed Turtle Island. And but what happened was, when the colonizers came, they exterminated the bison, so much so that there was only about 1,000 bison that remained. So I'm so used to calling it buffalo, but they actually say it's actually bison. But they wanted to do that to eliminate our way of life. So of course, this forced us onto pockets of land, which are called reserves, or some people call reservations. And because of that, we've been separated from the land which we were given by the Creator to steward. And the lands in Turtle Island, as a result, have suffered from it. Like today, there's overforesting, there's water pollution, land pollution, etc. Again, just showing this, when the land and the people are separated, the land suffers, So we understand that the land requires healing from the trauma it's experienced. But when we become responsible as the stewards of the land, according to, it even says this in 2 Chronicles 7:14. So again, this connection as Indigenous people. It says in here, 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face, God's face, and turn from their wicked ways, then God says that he will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. And interestingly, here in Canada, as we've been reclaiming some of our lands through settlements where the treaties were not honored by the Crown, we're now seeing a return of the bison on Indigenous land. And so, again, for the Jewish people, we see the same thing. When the Jews were exiled from the land that God entrusted to them, the land responded. And it didn't respond in a good way when the Jewish people left, because they're indigenous to the land. Even Mark Twain, as you all know, he described the land of Israel in 1867 when he first came. He said it was a desolate, mournful, and barren place, noting its rich soil was given to weeds with a few trees or people, calling it a desolate country which sits in sackcloth and ashes. And why was that? Because the Indigenous people were not there. They were not there to steward the land. And so, well, we'll see what happened after that. But, when the Indigenous people returned, since God says that he's going to bring his people back from the four corners of the earth. And when they started coming back, the earth is responding. Now, vineyards have been replanted all over in Judea and Samaria. It says the mountains drip with new wine. You are, like the Jewish people, are winners of wine competitions. This is when things have come back. The hills flow with milk. While we were there, we actually visited kibbutz, Yad Mordechai, and they said that they have the best milk in the world. I didn't even know that, but and the ravines of Judah run with water, like the desalination for drinking water and also to water the land. I just saw that the Sea of Galilee is being filled with water. You are repairing the earth. The Indigenous people are back in the land and it's flourishing, So I just wanted to show another quick slide. We had the awesome privilege to be in the Ben Hinnom Valley while we were there. And we've been there for some time, like from over the years. And the Ben Hinnom Valley If people don't know the history there, it was a desolate place. There wasn't a lot growing there, but we came again to play the drum, just to also just declare that awakening of the land, connection with the Jewish people here, and today, I mean, you see, it's just flourishing. The grass is flourishing again when the Indigenous people are back in the land. It flourishes. So that was awesome. We got to, because what we actually say as Indigenous people when we dance, we actually dance our prayers. So we're praying whenever we're in Israel, we're praying, uniting with the Jewish people, the other Indigenous people of the land, that the land would awaken and respond. So that was awesome. So thirdly, now, to be an Indigenous person, the third thing is that we have been given authority over the land. This is very important. We have the connection to the land, we're stewards of the land, and thirdly, we have authority over the land because the creator of the universe was the one who chose us to live on our lands. So here, this is what we say, and in Genesis, 1:26 says the same thing. God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So what does it mean to have dominion? Well, dominion is that God delegated his authority, because he's the one who created it. He delegated his authority to us to rule, manage, and care for creation responsibly, reflecting God's character. So we now have the authority over the lands, and it's very, very important as Indigenous people that we actually understand this authority that we have. Because who wants the authority? Well, go right back to Genesis 3:15. God says that he will put enmity between you, meaning Satan, that was the serpent, and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring, and he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So from the very beginning, Satan wants authority over all the earth, right? So he must take it or steal it from humans who have been delegated this authority from God. So this is why we see such a huge battle against the Jewish people, where you've been given authority over that land, and similar to us and many Indigenous peoples in the world, because we have been given this authority, but Satan wants to rule the land. So, we have, Satan wants to annihilate every Indigenous person, every Indigenous group, right? So, and similar to us, the harmony was destroyed after the treaties were not honored by the crown, and we were dispossessed from the land. Like I said, they put us into reservations. So we had the reservation system, but then we also had the residential schools, which was operated, unfortunately, by the organized church, and that aimed to assimilate us through oppressive measures. But we know that our tribal inheritance shall be restored when we relate to Creator through the Messiah and we find a renewed identity in him. So, we are still, our people are still in this position where we're needing to reclaim our authority because of what has happened to our people through these oppressive measures, like I said. So, but we know we've found the way through the God of Israel. We understand that the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the one true God. And so through the word, as the nations, we are called to align, so just again, coming back to the big picture, we see, the big picture is that God wants to establish his kingdom on the earth. Like I said, we believe that we were only one small part. We didn't recognize way at the beginning what God's big plan was, because there was always this, battle. It wasn't perfect here in Turtle Island. Sometimes there's that romantic view that maybe it was, but it wasn't. But we know that there is this big picture. How is God going to establish and renew creation and bring harmony back to all of creation? Well, we know Psalm 132, for Adonai has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling. This is my resting place forever. Here I dwell, for I have desired it. So again, we see that this is where God has chosen to set up his kingdom in Israel, in Jerusalem. And so this is why there's such a big battle for this place, But it also says in Micah 4:1-2, at the end of days, maybe we're getting close to that, the mountain of Adonai's house will be established as chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills. Peoples will flow up to it. Then many nations, that's including us, the indigenous peoples from all the earth, will go and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Adonai, to the house of the God of Jacob. Then he will direct us in his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For Torah will go forth from Zion, and the word of Adonai from Jerusalem. So we are recognizing, many of our ways, the good ways of our ancestors, are actually quite similar to the ways of God, like I talked about at the very beginning, our grandfather teachings, But we found the fulfillment of God's big plan to restore the whole earth, because we're all meant to be stewards of the earth. Well, what is the best way that we can be stewards of the earth is to recognize what God's big plan is to redeem all of creation. And so we come alongside the Jewish people as indigenous peoples of these lands, being good stewards here. We come alongside his first people, the first of the first peoples, recognizing their place as God's covenant people, and us coming together to restore the earth. So I'll stop this here. Yeah, so my time is out now, but yeah, we just wanted to, when we came to Israel, we brought, like I said, a team of indigenous people. We were invited into various places to come alongside affirming the Jewish people as the indigenous people of the land of Israel. And thank you very much, Michael, for your information, because we understand this from our cultural understanding. We might not understand like what you were talking about, the Khazar theory and whatever. I hadn't even heard of that before, actually. I mean, there's so many things that people are just throwing, I think, really just to confuse the masses, So, but we just come at it from this very simplistic, really, bigger picture viewpoint. And, hopefully people will listen to what we have to say, because we do support you and we bless you.
Well, thank you so much, Melody. That was very insightful and warm and inspiring. And we just love your heart and soul, and that was awesome. So we now open it up for questions. I know that in one sense our time is up, but we do want to give some time for you to respond to questions. So who would like to ask a question? Okay, we've got Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful, Melody. With the surrounding First Nations people to Israel, the Kurds and the who were, the Sumerians descended from the Kurds, and the Assyrians and the Armenians, and then the Egyptians. Do you know of connections with them, with Kurds and Egyptians? Because they've all been Arabized or been attempted to be Arabized.
No, I haven't connected with them personally to know, yeah, the histories. Yeah, I think we all have to really dig into that, like on our own, even in Canada. I think everywhere there's been this desire for the Indigenous people to actually not know who they are and not know their authority. So we really have to come back to that. Everybody needs to kind of do this thing. And I know in Canada, a lot of people we're all looking for our identity, and so it's very important that we do this research really on our own. Having said that, though, I think even in Canada, some of the cultural ways of the past are different now from what it is today because cultures they progress and they change. I know even my mother, who's on here, she said, the way that I was taught when I was young is, this is where we got more of what we spoke about here. It's even things have changed today to what it once was because I think there's this mixing of other ideologies, that try to come in, New Age perhaps, these kinds of things. We really have to go back to what was the ancient paths, where we really came from. So, I pray that other people would go back to that, It's kind of like what you were saying, there's all these ideas as to what a Palestinian is, just all this mix up of culture and identity. So, yeah, it's very important to go back though. Go further back.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Okay. Amanda?
I have a question. It might be a bit controversial, it might even be off topic, I don't know. But, you talk about Satan and from the Christian perspective, about the snake being Satan in the Garden of Eden. It's not quite exactly the Jewish perspective. But what I want to ask is, if we're created, if God created us, created Satan, and what's the interest, do you think, of having this so-called Satan created by God want to destroy all the Indigenous people? I mean, what is there to gain in the world by doing that?
By destroying the Indigenous people?
Well, you said Satan's out to destroy all the Indigenous people, and God created Satan. So what is it in God's interest to have Satan destroy all the Indigenous people?
Well, I don't think it's within God's interest to destroy the Indigenous people.
Well, what's in Satan's interest? And we believe Satan was created by God. So what's in Satan's interest? If you don't believe Satan's created by God, well then that doesn't then that you can't answer the question. But if you believe Satan is created by God, then that's the question that I'm asking.
Well, Satan wants the authority, right? That's what he's after, is the authority over all the earth.
For what? For why?
So that he can take it from the Creator, from God.
So
of course,
God created something to take God's creation away from God.
And have creation follow him. I mean, we have this every day where there's this fight within us. Do we do what is right and good, or do we do what is evil? That evil inclination that is within us. We always have a choice every day to follow that, or this way or that way.
But so God created all of that. So then could you say then that Satan is just a version of the evil inclination within us, and that actually it's not out to destroy the Indigenous people, it's out to activate and act as a catalyst to make us to do that, stand up and fight for who we are and fight for our rights?
Yeah.
One seems a bit of a cop-out for Satan's fault. as opposed to seeing that, like Michael said earlier, that we're all just cowards, basically, with no moral fiber, and that we don't actually stand up and speak out. We use a lot of these, narratives as excuses. It's all Satan's fault. I hear it a lot from the Christian church, whereas in the Jewish tradition, we know that the evil inclination within us is God-given, and it's up to us to elevate it into light.
But with respect to our people, how could we fight back when there was, thousands of colonizers that came, and we tried to speak and to do what was right, and they weren't willing to listen and actually do what was right,
I don't know, but you take Hanukkah as an example, and the Maccabean family, there were very few against very many, and they won. So I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Well, a lot of our people did. A lot of our.
So we've got some big questions there. We've got Kathy's put her hand up again. Can we hear from you quickly? And we are going to have to wind up very soon.
Yeah, it's just kind of on the big picture topic. There was a very interesting article that I read this morning about looking at this incredible rise in the pro-Palestinian marches, particularly all around the Western world, because they don't know the history, and these marches aren't in the Arab world so much. They know exactly who the Palestinians are. But in the Western world, it's kind of like that it's really tapped into rebellion against God and God's his sovereign word, his absolute values. And this is the great kind of uniting cause of rebellion. And as you've said, Amanda, about this, this struggle within each human, we've each come from God, been given soul by God, to which way will you choose, which way you will choose, choose today which way you'll go. And we do need to reflect back on a constant basis, individually, community, nationally, choose which way we are to go. And because it's that freedom, the freedom of will that gives dignity. And if everything is done for you, or you expect somebody else to do it all for you in the means of the government.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. I think one of the things that people are saying is, when we look at the pro-Palestinian movement, everything that is anti-Judeo-Christian values, or you might say anti-God, anti many of the values on which our of the West, for example, has been built, all of those are thrown in. So environmental issues, gender issues, class issues, everything's all been thrown into this pro-Palestinian argument at the moment. But look, we do need to end. I'm going to just have Melodie and Michael just make a last statement, and then we are going to have to close, and just thank them so very much for what they have shared today. So Melodie, would you like to respond, and then Dr. Michael?
Sure. So just on behalf of many Indigenous believers from across Turtle Island who have actually, you can actually go to one of our Instagram page, because there are many across Turtle Island who do bless the Jewish people as the Indigenous people of the land of Israel. You can go there and see those. But yeah, we just want to say that we support you and we bless you. We pray for you, and we're fighting a similar battle here as you are there. Yes, God is with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just want to say again what an honor it's been to be able to be here and to share with you guys and how important your work is. When I was talking about those who didn't have the moral fiber and who are cowardly, I certainly didn't wasn't referring to you guys. You have the moral fiber and the conviction, and hopefully you're an encouragement and a light to other people who maybe need a little bit of a push in that direction. But I appreciate your work, and again, thank you for letting me contribute just a little bit to it for God and His glory.
Yes, and so Michael and Melody, you both contributed awesomely. And Michael's full message, as he said before, will be up on our website. And also the recordings of this session and last night's session will go up as well. But look, we can't thank you enough, and thank you for all who have attended. So over to Norman for the last word.
Once again, Dr. Michael and Melody, and thank you for many that's been on here. From Barbara and myself, we want to personally say to you all, Happy Hanukkah. And Michael and your wife and family, you stay warm in Chicago. And to all that's been on here, you all have a safe and wonderful Happy Hanukkah. We know it starts there this week. We will join the Jewish community here in Cairns. So I was talking to the rabbi there yesterday, and so we certainly will be there. And continually we'll be praying for, we have a large menorah in the last 5 years that's been in the heart of our city. I went down there a couple of nights back and it wasn't there, but hopefully when I drive into the city today, that the Hanukkah menorah will be up. So shalom, and stay safe, and have a wonderful, wonderful time with your families, and stay safe. Shalom. Blessings.
Thank you to you too. Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Yes,
Chag
shalom.
Sameach.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you,
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.